Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pressing Matters. I'm Scott. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. You know, when I was a young man in high school, I had a job at the local mall at a record store. That was my dream job. And because of the exposure there, you know, I always felt like among my circle of friends that I had more advanced musical taste than most people. But, you know, all of us were listening to what has become classic rock. So, you know, Rush, Boston, Black Sabbath, Robin Trower, all these groups that were heavy hard rock. Progressive rock was something that a few dabbled in. Most people had some Yes albums, perhaps a King Crimson album, maybe Court of the Crimson King. But as far as Genesis, I don't think many people were into Gabriel era Genesis. It was a little weird for most people, and I embraced it. I loved the whole run. But Gentle Giant was something beyond this. And I remember seeing this cover in the import section and marveling over it because it's so beautiful. The artwork, of course, is by Roger Dean. And I'm like, Gentle Giant? They weren't very well known in the United States, at least not in my circles. And I picked up a couple of Gentle Giant albums. I think my first was Power in the Glory, the one that has like a playing card on the cover. It looks like a king or something like that. And although I was intrigued, I was like, this is really weird for me. It's a little even beyond my sophisticated taste. But it stuck in my mind that someday I'm going to get into Gentle Giant. I picked up a few other albums at the time. I appreciated them, heard them a couple times. And now those albums are gone. When I got into college, I had to sell a bunch of albums to survive. Biggest mistake of my life, but you do what you have to do. Gentle Giant crept back in when I was browsing a record store once, and I found this. A UK Vertigo copy of Octopus. And finally, I had a Gentle Giant album back in my collection. And I heard it a couple of times, and I loved it. But I didn't really immerse myself in it like I have recently. Recently, with all the system upgrades, hearing a Gentle Giant album is quite a different experience than listening to it on my 1970s hi-fi setup. It is something that really blew my mind, actually. And recently, my friend Oswaldo said, hey, I've heard this album, Octopus, via a new reissue, and it's fabulous. And I said, oh, I know the album well. He had heard a UK pressing in the past, but he didn't have one on hand for an A-B comparison. And I have not the first Vertigo, but the spaceship label Vertigo. So I said, let me borrow that. And I'm going to see if it's as good as you think. Because if memory serves me, the UK Vertigo was spectacular. So I brought it home. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about this type of music and the comparison at the end. We also may be able to include audio files at some point. They'll be in the description box in the future shortly. We didn't have the coordination to do that right now, but we're going to pick a track and you can hear both versions. What struck me about the first time I heard Gentle Giant is classical and jazz influences, particularly classical, and even going deeper to medieval influences. There's something very unusual going on in Gentle Giant beyond the obvious virtuosity and unusual time signatures. When you look at who's playing on this album, I'm going to go through this. I have to read it off because each one is a multi-instrumentalist, and they play a variety of instruments. And once you understand the instrumentation on the album, you might have a better appreciation for how fantastic this actually is. Derek Schulman is the lead singer. And if you see a video clip of him performing something here, you realize that unlike the theatrical presentation of, say, Gabriel, he has his own magnetic charm that I found very, very interesting. I loved watching those early Gentle Giant clips and seeing these guys play all these instruments on stage live. Derek plays alto saxophone in addition to doing the lead vocals. His brother, Phil Schulman does vocals, trumpet, tenor and baritone sax, and mellophone. Ray Schulman, bass guitar, violin, viola, and guitar, and vocals. Gary Green, electric and acoustic guitars and percussion, and Kerry Miniar, piano, Hammond organ, Moog synthesizer, mellotron, vibraphone, cello, lead and backing vocals, and finally John Weathers on drums, percussion, and xylophone. Think of that. That is like a small orchestra. And the music of of Gentle Giant, is very orchestrated, very complex, especially the vocal arrangements. When you get beyond the first impression of hard to follow time signatures, stop and start rhythms, complex sections where there'll be a drop and into something quiet and then back to something vibrant, it's dazzling to listen to. And listening to Octopus is probably a good entry point. There was earlier work by the band. Some diehard fans prefer the first two albums over this, but most people feel like this is the album that started the classic period for Gentle Giant. And I think it's an excellent entry point into the band. My original copy is this. So this is a UK Vertigo. I looked on Discogs. The original with the swirl label is the first, and it's very expensive. This is the spaceship label. Here you go. One of the most beautiful labels ever created, I think. And although I haven't had the opportunity to compare to swirl labels, they're highly regarded as well. An original of this, or this copy, could go for about $70 at max. So not terribly crazy. And when I tell you about the differences here, I think you'll be intrigued. First, let's look at this. The original has a green color tone here. This reissue has gone with a bluish tone here. I don't know why, if it was intentional or not. It looks beautiful on its own, but I feel like this is probably closer to the original painting. This is a complete image on this cover. And boy, I'd love to see that original painting. I wonder who has it. Okay, so you've seen that. Let's take a look at this reissue. So this was done for the 50th anniversary of the album, the release of the album. It was released in '72. Let me see here. It was released in December '72 and February '73 in the US. The US had a different cover. I'm going to try to include it here. Why they went with a different cover is one of the great mysteries of record collecting, because this is so beautiful and so iconic. Roger Dean, did so many beautiful covers for Yes. And I think that's what intrigued people about the import version of this, where they were seeing something completely different from the US cover, which is a little squeamish, to be honest with you. It's funny, but they were on Columbia in the US, I believe. Columbia or Capitol? Not sure. This was recorded at Advision Studios in London, produced by Gentle Giant themselves. The inside is the same on both the original and this reissue, which is from a company called Alucard. Um, there is something here that is a bit of a mystery. I tried to do a little research on it. Um, Stephen Wilson did some remixes of their catalog. This is a 50th anniversary release, and it's not a remix, to my understanding. It doesn't sound like a remix. It sounds like the original mix. Yet they carried over the credit for Stephen Wilson doing a remix. So it is a little unusual. I think it's an error. Maybe one of you diehard Gentle Giant fans can tell me the truth on that. I had been listening to the original pressing for the last couple of weeks, and recently, really over the last year, and more intensely. I'm going to describe the Alucard reissue first. As far as pressing quality, the original UK pressing, I imagine, has great pressing quality. My pressing has been played quite a bit before I received it. So there is a pretty high level of groove noise, but it is clean and beautiful. The reissue naturally is cleaner, but not perfect. It's not an audiophile pressing. It's pretty average by most standards. And even with ultrasonic cleaning, I detected some noise on the record. The music is intact. You will get plenty of musical enjoyment from the Alucard reissue. And you wouldn't really know any difference. You'd think, just like my friend Oswaldo thought, this is fabulous. You have to hear this. So the fact that there's an affordable edition out there, I think maybe around $30 or less of this record that sounds really good, is a good thing, because finding a clean original UK is tough. But as I listened to it in isolation, I thought, this is really good. I can see why Oswaldo was impressed. But when you turn to the UK Vertigo, you realize the legend is true. I don't have many original UK Vertigos. They're pretty rare here. I have a couple, I think. But in this particular case, there's something special about this that is just magical. When you compare them, the UK has a fresh quality. You can see into the production, which is quite complex, and hear into the spaces between the instruments. It's not really separation, it's clarity. It's the original tape. There's something about it that you feel immersed in the record in a way that the Alucard doesn't quite touch. The Alucard sounds good, but it's as if there is like a acoustically transparent fabric between you and the record. The stop and start feeling of some of these things, like it's very, very dynamic and quick. The transients on the original are sharply defined, not harsh, but very quick and fast and have punch. The bass also on the original is unbelievable. It's when you hear it first come in, you're like, oh my God, this is like deep and beautiful. The Alucard comes close, doesn't quite touch it. So you have a scrim between you. The bass is good, but not mind-blowing. The clarity is a little lesser on the Alucard. And it's important because hearing into these arrangements help to unravel them. They're so complex, there's so much going on that you want to be able to follow every instrumental line clearly. And the magic of the UK pressing is it lets you do that with ease. You don't have to try. You don't have to do anything except sit back and see this tapestry of gorgeous sound surround you. What's really interesting about this is the medieval influences, especially in the vocal arrangements. I'm not an expert on medieval music. I have some in my collection, but the vocal style, which is kind of like overlapping round of voices, is very, very interesting and one of the defining features of the album. The playing is virtuosity defined, really. It's any of these performers could be in a classical ensemble with no problem. They are extremely, extremely talented. And if you see the video clips of them playing, you'll understand that. There's also an exquisite balance to the UK pressing. It never gets bright or harsh. It is smooth on top with excellent clarity and definition and detail. It's one of the most beautiful pressings that I've ever heard. And when it comes down to the final analysis, the Alucard is good. Probably a high quality streaming version would be just as good. But the magic happens on the UK. It's a record that I talked recently about a record playing on your system and then a record playing the system. What I mean by that is the turntable takes hold of the original and it kind of unleashes it in a way, at least on my system. I recently did upgrades to the system. VPI and I worked together to do 4 major upgrades to the Scout. And certain records just are released and inhabit the room. It's almost like the system is working with the record rather than just portraying the record. And that's a difference I hear in this. We also heard it on Pink Floyd's Metal, which I reviewed recently. The UK did this in a way that no other version really touched. And it's the same here. It's as if the system becomes a musical instrument. It's part of the process. On the Alucard reissue, you're hearing it completely, but it's sort of sitting there. It's not being released. And I think that's the difference here. Is that difference worth an extra $35 or $40 to search for a beautiful original? Honestly, if you like this music, I would say absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. This is one of those special records that's magical. And once you get immersed in the UK pressing, you will not want to leave it. It'll be a cornerstone in your collection. If you're curious, you want a vinyl version of it, you don't want to spend a lot of money, the Alucard is recommended. It's very, very good, just as Ozzy thought. But I think when he hears this difference, he's going to agree with me that there's no touching the UK original, or in this case, the reissue from 2 years later on the Spaceship label. It has something special that analog lovers relish, and that is total immersion into the music. Those are my thoughts on these 2 pressings of Gentle Giant's Octopus. Let me know if you've ever heard it, what you think of it, and what your favorite pressing is. And until next time, I'm Scott from The Pressing Matters. Thank you so much for watching today, and have a great day.